We are super fast. We have the questions here in front of us and we can answer them immediately. And one additional comment I would also like to share is that we used an ATP 800 for our examples. And if you want, you can also log into this ATP by going to the virtual lab that we have provided. You go to support.zyxel.eu. There you find the virtual lab, and there you can also log into the ATP 800 yourself if you want to see and experience our configuration. Right, having said that, we never leave you alone, and we also have our professional services, value-added services. We have various vouchers prepared for you. If you run into a problem and you need support in a way that you want us to do the configuration for you, we offer the configuration services to you. And new is also that you can book an appointment online with us. So that works super nice. Right. You can use your one login access to all our platforms, the partner portal, the support portal, the campus academy. And finally, you can also follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. And on YouTube, we will also be able to find this video after the session. Right, so let's see, everything good, everything green. Then let's go, and even the slide is green here. So Tobias, today we talk about the Firewall, the second edition of these episodes, and we talk about zones. You will explain what zones are, what I can configure them for, why we have basic zones, and so on. Then we do a default configuration, how it looks. We look into services, groups, and then how to enable UTM features. If you don't know, we can also show you or tell you where to find and buy licenses for the UTM services. Then you also show how to read the log and how to debug some problems that you might come across. And then we also open for your feedback and have received anything. So once again, if you have any questions, please use the question button. We are open to answer them right away. Tobias, let's go into this one. Zone concept for firewall. Why do I need a zone in a firewall?
Yeah, why we need it? Because a zone can control the source and destination direction from an interface.
So from outside the WAN, for example, to inside the LAN.
Exactly, that could be one example.
Okay.
And it's important to create zones before you start configuring your firewall. And let's talk first of what is a zone. So we have it under object zone. And here we have a few standard parameters like LAN1, LAN2, WAN zone, IPsec VPN, and each zone includes members. So for example, the WAN zone includes all the WAN interfaces, where the IPsec VPN may include your IPsec VPN tunnel, L2TP, SSL VPN, if you merge SSL VPN into IPsec, but you can also separate VPN technologies. This is all up to you. And here it is important to know which interface is in which zone. So you should first check the default configuration, and then based on your needs, you can adjust it. Yeah. And we have a system default zones here, but we're also having user configuration zones. So you can still go and create your user-defined zone, for example, TECHtalk, or a VPN site in Cologne, for example, and add related member interfaces, VLANs into the zones.
Yes, so we are now, we are sitting in Germany, so that's why we have Cologne there. If you go back one slide, Tobias, if you don't mind, can you explain the default zones that we have configured and why we have done that?
Yeah, so as a default, we have LAN1, LAN2, LAN, WAN, DMZ, opt, SLVPN, IPsec, and tunnel. So all you see here, but not with all members. So for example, LAN1 will have by default GE3, where LAN2 will have GE4. So I changed it now here to merge GE3 and GE4 into one LAN zone to just control all my LAN interfaces to WAN and don't separate into LAN1 and LAN2. But because of I have a VLAN 2, I still add VLAN 2 into LAN 2 to have some more granular control. The WAN is default and will automatically add all WAN interfaces you have created, which is up and online. DMZ is like optional, still by default usually empty, or DMZ may have one interface assigned based on the model. It changed a bit.
Mhm.
And SSL VPN have your SSL VPN tunnel, and IPsec have your IPsec tunnel in case of you create any, because by default there's no VPN configured on our device. And tunnel is usually empty. It's some legacy history value, so we are not going to use this anymore.
Okay, so
yeah, so let's explain the standards and which direction is doing which action.
So default configuration means that's defined in our firewall when you get them fresh and you unpack it. That's already defined there.
Yes.
And we will go through that, and then everybody can decide if they want to keep them as they are or if they want to change them.
Yeah,
okay.
Correctly. So we have any to device. Device means, in my example, UC Flex. It could be also ATP, for example. And any to device means simply from every interface can act with the firewall. For example, DHCP traffic in network, the DHCP server is running on the firewall. So this device, this zone must be configured. The second one is the LAN interface, this LAN to any, which means that every LAN client which receives usually a DHCP address can use the internet, can reach the other LAN interface. The LAN interfaces to device is, for example, need for ping, for connectivity check. If you want to prove the gateway is working, then this is a needed direction. WAN to device is for some default services, for example, VPN, HTTPS port, WAN access, so everything from outside you want to reach the UC Flex. And finally, we have any to any, which is just dropping all the traffic which is not classified in before. So it's some kind of protection rule in the end, that what you didn't allow is finally denied. And if you have something in a zone which is not a member, it's also by default blocked. So maybe you create an IPsec tunnel, but you forgot to add it into IPsec zone, then it will be a member of the any.
Correct. And these are the normal configurations. So what's your recommendation? Should I change them? Should I leave them? Should I, when I start from scratch, should I take them all out and then, so to say, define them newly?
Yeah.
What's your recommendation?
So the standard concept is still some configuration we prove as a good security solution and is working for the most customers. So I would more prefer to keep it in instead of delete everything. Because if you delete everything first and start from scratch configuring a firewall, then you may lose exactly these important things. And you are wondering why I cannot reach my server because maybe the gateway is not responding and some default rule is missing. Or you have built a VPN connection and it's built successfully, but there's no traffic going through VPN. This could all belong to zones and firewall rules, which was predefined. And if you delete them, you may lost some features you need to reconfigure later or even not think about it.
So just to prevent that something is not working, keep them there as long as you know what you're doing. If you later on adapt them or change them or delete them, that's a different story then.
Exactly. Well, so let's have a look on the grouping. So under object service, there are a few service groups which can be linked into the firewall module. And one important here is the WAN to firewall feature, which have some default services include. And WAN to firewall means, again, from outside, from everywhere usually, to my device, to my security device. And this rule have some default parameters. So for example, we have here AH, ESP, HTTPS, EKE, and NAT-T. And these standard ports are needed for services. So the first classification here is VPN services to build up VPN tunnel, to let SSL VPN users join correctly. And the HTTPS port is by default 443, but should be changed for security reasons to another port. So if you decide for another port, if you change it on the device, then you can create the port in this list here and just replace HTTPS by the other port if you not have any other needs for the HTTPS port.
Yeah, and while you're reading a question there, I can explain that if you would like to get more details into this, you can also go to support.zyxel.eu, and there you can ask for the question, ask for the topic here there. The link of the article is also mentioned there. So if you have the VPN, for example, and you need the services, they are mentioned there, but we have also more information around that on this knowledge base article.
Yeah.
Now to the question.
Yeah,
Tobias?
so the first question here is, there are some additional native rules that don't appear here. I mean, the allow from LAN to LAN, inter-VLAN routing, that you cannot block unless you create explicit rules to avoid. Yeah, so for the inter-VLAN routing, let's move already one page to the next page. It's kind of combination with the allow asymmetrical route. So if you have an LAN-to-LAN routing, you may enable this feature. We will go more detail into this feature in the next tech talk for routing, because it more go into routing direction. But here you can have the inter-VLAN routing allow. Otherwise, you can put your VLANs or even LAN networks into separate zones, or you block them by source and destination. Yeah. So that is some feature. So if you want to have it, then enable asymmetrical route, then inter-VLAN routing should work. And if you want to block it, then create separate rules for it.
Thanks for that question. Another one we have.
Yeah, the other one is a kind of the HTTP port replacement. Of course, if you replace an HTTPS port, you need also adjust it on a few different points on the configuration. So let me try to move into the web interface here. We have it under www. From here, you can change the HTTPS port. So make sure to not block yourself. Yeah. So I prefer to have a temporary, if you do it from WAN at least, both ports in the WAN to Firewall group, then you can adjust the port from here. Make sure this port is not overlapping, conflicting with anything you have configured in NAT. Otherwise, it may not work and you will also lose the access. And if you use SSL VPN, you anyway have an additional port in one of the latest releases, which you can configure here. So if you just want to protect the GUI completely from WAN and you don't need it for admin, but for SSL VPN, just give another SSL VPN port, which didn't allow access to the web interface, or just change the www port.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Before we go into UTM licenses now and services, Tobias, we have a firewall now brand new from Zyxel delivered, like the ATP 800, which we're using here. So why do I need UTM licenses at all? What can I do without and what can I do with UTM licenses?
Yeah, so to have UTM licenses have two benefits. The standard firewall first is protecting your traffic inbound, outbound, but not with advanced features. So if you have UTM features, you are deeper inspecting, for example, antivirus, anti-spam, and especially for firewall, you can build different configurations for content filter profile and for application profile, for example. So you can allow something to a specific group, which you block or allow different to another group.
Okay, so it's kind of a dynamic implementation of that.
Yes, and here UTM services can help to not just allow or block something completely. It could help to allow partially different things you don't want to configure manually.
Applications or whatever.
For example.
Okay, let's go into this then.
Yeah, so let's see, for example, as we have teachers, for example, in a school, and we have students, but we want them to access different content. so that you don't need to create now millions of firewall rules and say, okay, we are blocking Instagram, we are blocking Facebook, we are blocking Twitter. We have kind of content filter packages which can summarize this by a third-party vendor into a group, which is just social media. So IP addresses will change so frequently that you cannot self-update your firewall that frequently as the IP addresses renew. And this allows you finally to have some content filter, for example, and then the teacher group may access everything, but the student group is limited to education services, which they need for learning. Yeah, and this you can define then in a firewall rule. So you can, for example, create a firewall rule saying, from my LAN network, I have some teacher profile, which do then everything, and I create a second rule for my students, which are limited by content filter profile. And to differentiate that, you need to find another parameter. So there are a lot of any here, but we can use IP version 4 source, for example, and create a different VLAN for teacher and a different VLAN for our students. We could also have a user login that they pre-log into our firewall, and we classify then the two groups. So there are different possibilities. If you combine this with Nebula, for example, Nebula access point support DPPSK feature, that's a dynamic pre-shared key, which is also bind to an interface. So based on which Wi-Fi pre-shared key the teacher or student is typing in, it will assign VLAN 10 or VLAN 20, and you also have the separation. So there are different features in our products which can fulfill this scenario.
That this possibility would then separate teachers and students by already accessing the VLAN as such.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be then very easy to handle, very straightforward, be very easy to administrate, I think, later on. And also the UTM licenses and services. If you have a social media blocking for example, students, and there's a new social media coming up, it's automatically in that group, and we take care on blocking that on the service area.
Exactly. So this is a real-time service, and the list will update it also quite frequently. So we did in the history some tests in our support campus, and we create our own web pages just to simulate, okay, I create a domain, how fast this domain is added into this list. It takes just a few minutes. So whatever is new created in World Wide Web, it could be somehow found in the web content filter. And I think that's quite amazing. And also we have the application patrol filter we can link here, which is going deeper in this feature. So we have scenarios, for example, we are still using this tool. They are saying, I want to block Facebook, but I still want people to like my page, to really give me the vote up. And this application patrol can do, it can detect dedicated traffic. For example, a Facebook login is not allow, but the like is allow. Or you can use it for WhatsApp and say, okay, WhatsApp is allow for message sending, but I don't want to send pictures, videos, or documents. So you have a very granular control on these kind of features. And application patrol is the only feature which can really block Tor networks or proxy services, VPN services, because it can detect it and it will analyze the traffic. And this you cannot reach by content filter. With content filter, you block a web page where application patrol is really looking into the tools itself.
And also, there was a question the other day from a customer that wanted to block the chat of a certain social media on a page. Is that possible?
Yeah, that would be also possible. Okay. Yeah, so you still can say, let's use Facebook again, that Facebook is allow, but Facebook Messenger is not allow.
That's
so
possible.
This is also doable.
Okay.
Well, then I have collected some logs, and the logs you can find under monitor log, and one example is blocked access. So it will show first the category, security policy, and in this case, the match default rule drop. So match default rule means the last rule from firewall is always the default rule. And here in my case, it was an IP address trying to access my WAN IP with port 7782. And under my WAN to firewall group, I don't have port 7782 open. So it will immediately block because it's not an allowed port. Also, we have changes. So if someone is doing a change on the firewall, it will be in log. It will also show which firewall rule. In this example, rule number 6 was changed, and the UTM content filter profile was set to disabled. We see the source WAN IP, so who was doing it, and that this was a config change. And also for forwardings, we have a security log. In this case, it's number 15, wanted firewall. We see it's a TCP service, and the group wanted firewall is matching here. And my WAN IP was accessing the WAN IP of ATP 800 with port 443.
Yeah.
Because of I just log in from remote to the web interface. And then we see access is forward.
Can you tell us why this line is red and the others are black?
Yes, I can. So this line is red because it's an alert. So we have the option in the firewall to have log matched traffic. And if you are doing some debug or test, for example, you can change it from no to log alert. And if you change it to log alert, then the log will show in red color. So if you try to find something, if you configure a new NAT entry and you may not reach your device, just use log alert. At least you can see then, okay, access is forward to my NAT, and maybe it's the gateway of my IP cam, which don't have the ATP 800, so I don't get a reply correctly to my WAN interface. Yeah.
So that's an easier way to find what you're looking for by basically seeing that the line is red. You have an alert on that, and then it's easier to identify the root cause of your problem.
Yes, you can easily debug it in that way.
Okay.
Yeah, and more debug possibilities are the filter, for example. You can click on show filter here, then this pop-up will come up, and I mean, it's not neat if you have just 20 firewall rules. But we are having customers and support, they're having 200, 300, 400 firewall rules. And to find then the right firewall rule for the reported issue, you need to use filter possibilities. You can select, for example, from WAN to any, so you see everything from internet to any interface, which rules may affect it. And here it's now pre-filtered to 4 rules, and we can see, okay, the first rule is allowing some kappa control. The service, for example, is neat if you have access points somewhere over VPN or just somewhere at home, and you want to use the ATP UC Flex as a managed controller. Then you can use also kappa through WAN. And the second rule and the third rule here, having some switches which are configured in NAT. So we need a firewall rule for this port forwarding on the destination port to reach these devices. Mm-hmm. And the last one is our default rule. We know from previous log, it was number 15 here. And we see it also filtered here. It's priority number 15. So here you can find exactly the right firewall rule for the right log. And last but not least, of course, any deny. So if you not configured anything on allow, then maybe it's not working because it's matching the deny rule.
Correct. Perfect. We got another question?
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, it's about the user rule. So I think it's talking about this user here. So let's move to the GUI. We have also under objects, usually you find everything under object, the zone, the services, addresses when you want to work with source IP or destination IP address.
Or block geo IPs or include
geo IP. Of course, you can also have geo IP. We was not talking about this, and have your geo IP object. Yeah, so you create it here as geography. Then you select a region where you are sitting. So let me maybe choose what does we choose now here? Some Europe. Yeah, let's say you are in Belgium. Then you just create a Belgium object. You confirm it with OK. And then in Firewall, you can just create a rule and say, one Belgium, for example, is allow. And in source object, you have then Belgium, and then you can say, okay, everything from Belgium is allow to access my firewall with port 443, but all other countries you just exclude.
Yes.
And this is also kind of a security feature because you already block a lot of countries sending a lot of spam or doing scan attacks if you just select as source your own country you're operating.
Correct. So GeoIP is
Back
also
to
a
the
feature
question.
which is free now. So that's great. Back to the question.
We have user group here. And for example, it could be local users added here. Then these users are also logged in to the firewall. Or we have as legacy feature right now, SSO. SSO can be combined with Active Directory. So in case of the school, a teacher, a student is booting up the computer, logging in, for example, to Windows, then this user login can be duplicated to the firewall,
Okay. Yeah.
and we have the differentiation. Note that this feature is right now more announced as phase out, but will return in the future. So it may not working that good as it was in the past, but still you can use the local user, or you are using the way with the DPPSK for Wi-Fi users, which is also working here.
Good.
So is it possible to create a group of European countries? Yes, that is possible. So you can go
again
to an address group and then just add everything, change it here, address type, geography, and then have all European countries here. You also can create kind of a region here and already clone it, the list, so or you see which countries you need to include. So you have a few updates here possible to do.
So you need to define the group, and then you can use a group and allow traffic to the firewall, for example.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Then you just need one firewall rule and say, okay, I'm linking now the address group of my geographies I'm working with. Right. Be careful a bit with VPN services. Yeah, if someone drive to Spain, for example, fly to Spain and want to use VPN, then make sure to adjust firewall rule before that happens. Yeah, otherwise it's made too strong.
Correct.
Then we got a few other questions. So let me go to the questions first. At which moment our credentials are needed when we choose the user parameter in one rule? Finally, how to do that in Nebula. So far, Nebula is not supporting this feature right now. We are considering to support this, I think, 2024. So it takes a bit more time to have this feature on Nebula. Yeah, and the needed credentials, user parameter. Let's see, credentials are needed when we choose the user parameter. Yeah, the credentials is just a local user in a single case. So you are creating a user here with a password, and then using the firewall page with some, for example, captive portal page to log in this user before start using internet.
So you define the username, the password, and then you have access to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
And then another question, SSO agent is still support? No, not official right now, but it's still doable by SSH. So if you are still interested to do that, then just open a support ticket and we will try to assist you as best as possible with the SSH config for SSO. It's removed from web interface, but in firmware code, it's still in.
Good. Perfect. Then go back to the presentation, I would say, and we check a bit the debugging.
Okay, so let's...
I think we are, yes,
back. So
there we are.
Yeah, we also have features with mouse over. So if some objects hyperlinked in the firewall, just go mouse over to this and then you can see, okay, the name. So naming is extremely important. If you build a network, make directly the right names to the right switches on the right positions to later find exactly which devices may not operating correctly or need an AMR replacement to find it to adjust firewall rules. Make sure the type is correctly. I just show it for the geo IP, that this must be a geography address type. The same belongs, for example, to VPN. If you create a VPN with just a host object, you can reach the 100.11, but you cannot reach 100.12 because you don't link it. So then you need a subnet type, for example. You can see all IP addresses which are reachable, and you have the reference. You can click on hyperlink. So you can see, okay, this object is also linked to any other module. So let's go back to the GUI, for example, and to the firewall rule. Then we have the GS here with 2 objects. You click on it and you see, okay, I need it for firewall, but I have also configured the same object in NAT. So you're building self a structure to see, okay, my issue could be on firewall, but maybe also the NAT entry is wrong. So you can move from firewall to the NAT section and also double check from here if all settings are correct, or maybe your WAN IP changed and this is why it's not working. So there are different options to use this hyperlink and mouse over feature. And then we are having also mouse over to see the members of a zone. So you may adding a VPN tunnel or L2TP, and you forgot to set the zone. So let's have a quick look here on L2TP or IPsec. Just go in the phase settings. Here we have related settings zone. If you forgot here and set it to none, then you have a VPN tunnel, but you have no traffic in the firewall. So make always sure to select zones correctly if you're adding new content to your device. And the last is log and level action, which we mentioned before. You can set up log to no. If it's by default, for example, LAN to any, you don't need a log. You don't want to scan every outgoing traffic. No. That's too much. But everything which is on deny should have a log to find issues quickly. Or if you set up something new and you want to test it, then you can send it to log alert level.
Then you see it in red as you saw it earlier.
Exactly.
Perfect. So we got another question?
Yeah, we have another question is saying, is it possible to use OpenVPN or WireGuard with Zyxels? So far not. We have WireGuard at least on the roadmap for end of next year. It's a bit complex. I can tell you why it takes that long time. WireGuard is a third-party application. We need to integrate these things into our security devices. So we open somehow our security advices for these applications. And that makes our PQA and testing quite intense. And also the protection of kernel and everything needs to be 100% before we're starting to integrate WireGuard. But we have this feature request already, and we are working on improving that.
Yes. Perfect. So if you have any more questions, let us know. And if you have some feedback for us, you can share that with us. And some feedback we got last time.
Yeah, so the last TECHtalk feedback was a customer have a USG Flex and have a 5G router or LTE router with a SIM card, but not with unlimited data. So they just want to use this router in case of the main internet line is going offline or the fiber line is not there. And then start to consuming data as a backup.
Correct.
And yes, it's doable, this setup with a policy route. So we can set up policy routes with an active and a passive policy route. And it's checking it based on connectivity check. When the interface is down, then another policy rule will be automatically enabled. And you can build this process. And how exactly this works with an example we will show in the next TECHtalk, when we are talking about policy route and packet flow explorer. What is the routing way? Where is the traffic which we have allow and deny and firewall rule? How can I control it? Through which interface it is really sent out, and so on. When I need a route, or does VPN include automatically routes? All these questions will be answered on the next TECHtalk.
Perfect. And if you have any questions or feedback that you would like to share with us, you can use academy@zyxel.eu. And there you can also find on support.zyxel.eu, you can find information, for example, best practices for Wi-Fi, as well as we always update on a weekly basis our article about the latest software and updates. And there I would like to mention that you can always follow an article. So every time you subscribe to an article and there is an update, you will get automatically a notification about that there is something new to look at. And Tobias, there is a new firmware coming out, isn't it?
Yeah, on Friday we will release 4.73 for our legacy USG series. So if you still have an older USG 110, 210 in your network topology, they will have a final patch 4.73 with including a few more bug fixes. So feel free to update them. And yeah, that's for that. And
and the question, if there is some more information on how to use 5G as backup, do we have a knowledge base article?
Yes, there's a knowledge base article on that. So you can go to support.zyxel.eu and searching for WAN backup. That is the flow. It is the same article if you are using 5G or just a second DSL line. The concept is the same. It's equal which backup line you have, but this article is ready. If you cannot find it, just send an email to academy@zyxel.eu and we will send it to you.
If you found it and you are missing something in the article, there is also a comment field below in the article. You can also comment there and we enrich the article accordingly.
Of course. And another question is, can you show how to use DPPSK on USG ATP? Not that quickly. So DPPSK is part of Wi-Fi.
Correct.
And is only available on Nebula. So you can combine an on-premise firewall with the DPPSK feature of Nebula managed access points.
Exactly.
That would be the setup progress here. And I can at least try to have a look here. So let me see.
While you're typing, is there all access points that we have that are Nebula supporting DPSK? Or is it just specific ones?
There are some specific ones, yes. Not each model can support it. It may also require some license if you decide for that. So you see passwords are not always the easiest way to log in. Oh. So I think I cannot show you now, but you can still send an email to yeah, the Academy email address. And then too many passwords. Who also knows this?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. So let's see that there we have now in the Nebula environment that you're running an access point that is supporting DPSK.
No, it's just theoretically now, yeah. So it is called dynamic personal pre-shared key, and these are the access points which can support this feature. So the newer AX technology access points, and so it's a Wi-Fi 6 powered feature, you could say. And you can just change it then from the normal encryption method to dynamic pre-shared key. And then you have the user database in your user profile here. Let me see. Quite cloud authentication. There's DPPSK from here. And from here you can then add a user, a DPPSK user, and then you have this VLAN assignment feature. You can then assign VLAN 10, VLAN 20, and then this pre-shared key, which is generated for this user, can separate the network and allow you, for example, to set up this student teacher thing. Yeah. But it also have a few other possibilities to do because it's quite dynamically. So theoretically, you can also build some student apartment rooms where 200 students are living, and each student have maybe one access point in their room. Each student gets their own DPPSK key and are isolated in their own VLAN. So it's quite
that's happening quite often, isn't it?
Quite often happening, and this feature was requested previously. Yes,
but we see it's a paid feature at least.
It is a license feature for ProPack and VLAN assignment on Wi-Fi.
Yes. So if you need to buy some licenses, there is an implementation. You can buy it on the Zyxel marketplace, the license that you need. Good. No more questions. And you mentioned already next tech talk. Since Christmas is coming, we have it a bit earlier in the year. So we do it already in 2 weeks, Tobias. We talk about routing, as you said it, part 3 of our small series of basic firewall setup. Yes, and if there are no more questions, we thank you very much for participating. Tobias, did we forget anything, or is there anything else you would like to mention?
I'm very happy for the next tech talk. It will be quite interesting. I think especially packet flow is some more diagnostic feature where usually no customer is looking into, and it will be quite impacting how easy debugging could be.
Yes, and thanks for the question there. Yes, when you participated in this tech talk, you will get a follow-up mail. There you can find the recording as well as you can see the presentation as such, and you can also give some feedback to us if you want and share your ideas with us. So thank you for that, and let's close here and talk to you next time.
Yeah, just will answer the question from Mathieu, which was outstanding. Can we use a WAN connection for LAN 1 and another WAN connection for another VLAN, for example, maybe for Basic 3? Yes, so we will show this in Basic 3. It's a good example. I can already tell you it's doable and how to control different WAN interfaces for different local interfaces we will include in the December Tech Talk. Thank you for this hint.
Thanks for the question. Exactly. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We're Zyxel, and we're your networking ally.